All right. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started to reward the people who are here on time. So thank you folks for joining us. This is our first part to our 3-part webinar series on data training for the small farm. So yeah, we're going to jump right in with some brief intros, a little bit about our program, and then our team here from our partners here from Data Elevates are gonna be the lead instructors for today. So yeah, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So yeah, so just a brief overview here of what we are planning to learn today during this hour-and-a-half webinar. So I'm Elizabeth Vaughn, for those who don't know. I'm with the Small Farm Tech Hub at Community Alliance with Family Farmers. It's great to see you all here today. And we have our learning objectives here laid out for the series. So during today, we're going to be learning how data connects with each part of your effective decision-making, different data concepts, relevant sources and best practices. And then you'll learn a bit about CAS Tech Hub in case our program is new to you. And then throughout today, or throughout the next hour-and-a-half, we're encouraging you to drop questions in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand as well if things come up for you. But we'll also be hosting a brief discussion with all of you at the end. You will be asked to participate and think through your own farm data strategy. So just giving you a heads up on that in advance. And then at the end, we're going to have 10 minutes allotted for question and answer as well, if you'd rather hold your question for the end. That's our plan for the day today. We can go to the next slide. So yeah, a bit about CAF. We are a nonprofit that supports small family farms across California. And our mission is to build sustainable food and farming systems through policy advocacy and on-the-ground programs that create more resilient family farms, communities, and ecosystems. So the Small Farm Technology Hub is housed under CAF, and we're providing a lot of resources, direct technical support to farms on your technology needs, because we know small farms have a lot of those, just as we all do. All right, go to the next slide, please. A bit more about the Tech Hub. So who you see here is the 3 of us who are representing the Tech Hub currently at CAF. And this webinar series on data training is brought to you by the Small Farm Tech Hub. So we're working to identify right fit technologies for the small farm. We help small scale farmers, food hubs, and farmers markets navigate technological resources and expand their market opportunities. And the Tech Hub was born as a result of COVID and how much COVID impacted different market outlets and sales channels for farms, especially in California. So the Tech Hub was a response to that, to support farmers with finding new market channels or pivoting or getting new customers or reaching their existing customers. So that's how we came to be. So on this website that you see listed here, you'll find a ton of resources and updates on small farm technology. Encourage you to take a look if you haven't been able to do that yet. And yeah, and this training, as I mentioned, is being provided by Data Elevates. So I'm going to go ahead and let Prem introduce himself in a minute. But just so we have another visual of what's coming up for our next 2 series, we can go to the next slide, please. So just to review, this is part 1 of a 3-part series. They're all being structured to watch in order. So just noting that we're going to be posting the recordings to the registration pages and on CAF's YouTube channel. So for folks who aren't able to attend today, or you maybe know of a farmer who could benefit from this training and want them to get caught up on it and attend the 2nd or 3rd webinars, those will be available to watch fairly soon so you can get caught up with everyone. And please, I encourage you to share it with as many people as you want. These are all free and will be provided on YouTube for anyone to watch. So now I'll pass it over to our instructors for the next 90 minutes here. So take it away, Prem, please.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. And appreciate the opportunity to work with, collaborate, and connect with some of our small farmers on data for decision making. So yeah, so this is, as Elizabeth said, this is our first session of 3. This is on using data in small farm decision making. And so I'll go introduce myself in a second here, but I just wanted to just give a quick agenda of what we're going to be going through today. Introductions, of course, but we're going to talk about the value of data in farming. Particularly, we're going to focus on the data-driven decision-making cycle, which we're going to, frankly, go back to over and over again, because I think that's kind of one of the key, if not the key point message we're going to be going into in this session. Types of farm data sources, best practices in data use, including data analysis and managing data, and reviewing your farm data strategy, which that sounds fancy. It is not. but we're going to get into that, and it will be extremely relevant to sort of the farmers in the audience. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Prandaraj. I'm the head of business strategy and operations at Data Elevates. Just as a one-liner, I suppose, and our mission at Data Elevates is to really support people and social impact organizations use data more effectively for good. So we're extremely happy to be working with you all, with farmers and people in the food system space. For me specifically, I have about 20 years of experience in development work, but over the last several years, I've been pretty connected to the food system scene. I'm based in San Diego, so particularly sort of like the local food system scene in San Diego, through Community Health Improvement Partners, particularly, which is an organization Elizabeth was connected to, or is still connected to, I should say, but worked at with me as well in years past. So I have experience as well on workforce development, professional development programming for small farmers through a few different programs, working on business strategy and other things with small farmers in the region. And then more recently through Data Elevates, quite a bit of experience on professional development programs and workforce development programs around how to use data more effectively. So this is a perfect marriage of both of those pieces. So I'm really excited to be here. So maybe Zan, if you can say a few words about yourself.
Sure. My name is Zan Paxton. I'm head of data insights here at Data Elevates. I support Prem in his capacity building work on data-driven decision making. I also lead our portfolio in data analytics and data science. I am relatively new to food systems and the agricultural space, so I'm learning along with you guys. Prior to joining Data Elevates, I worked at the World Bank, and I worked on their health financing global solutions group at the World Bank, and then I did a lot of work in Africa and Southeast Asia. So this is switching to kind of domestic space is exciting for me, and so I'm excited to get to know you guys. Thanks, Prem.
All right, great, thanks, Zan. Okay, so actually Elizabeth went over a few of these things, but just going to note this really quickly. Yeah, just to reiterate, please, this is not a large group, of course, so definitely throw any questions or comments you have in the chat. If there's burning questions as well, or if I'm going too fast through the session, which can happen, feel free to frankly interrupt me. That's fine as well. If you can, and I understand there's bandwidth issues and people can be all over the place in terms of where they are. But if you can, sometimes it's nice to have videos on just for engagement. If not, understandable. And of course, we're recording the session as well. Thanks. All right. So a few questions just to break the ice. So maybe if everyone could just give a quick 30-second spiel on who you are, where your farm is located, some the types of product you're producing, and particularly why are you interested in this session? That'd be useful for us and useful for everyone. Elise, since you turned your video on, and I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Can you go first?
I actually will say I do not have a farm yet. We're investigating how to start one and what we need to know. And I'm actually a planner by trade. So I work in inventory planning. And so the data piece for me is obviously very relatable. And so I was just kind of dipping my foot in here and to see what data is available and how I can use it. So I'm just a newbie here, but thanks for having me.
Thanks, sounds great. Let's go down the list here on my list. Olivia. All right. Sometimes it might be challenging to get to the unmute button. How about Marilyn?
Hello, I'm Marilyn Sittiker and I live in Minnesota, but I work for Washington State University Extension, Thurston County, and I'm working with a local food hub comprised of small farmers. Most of these farmers, I think, are pretty data savvy, but I really wanted to attend this session so that I could see perhaps and get a better feeling for what the needs of other farmers are, and to see if there's some tips I could pick up that I can transmit to the farmers that I work with. I did invite all the farmers in our hub to come to your session, and might be for whatever reason 3 o'clock in the afternoon they're still out in the field. So anyway, but I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Not sure MB. Not sure it stands for. But...
Yeah, hi. My name is Michelle Bearmar, and I have a small farm in San Diego County. And I think I'm kind of I'm a data person. I like to track a lot of different things. And I probably track more than I need, maybe not enough of what I need. I'm here because I want to hear what you guys have to say and maybe think about that in my own context, and think about how, what's available and what I'm doing can, further help what we do.
Perfect. Thanks, Michelle. I'm glad you're here. Trish. Hi, Trish. You're on mute, Trish.
How are you?
Good, good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm Trish Watlington, and I have a teeny little backyard farm in La Mesa. My farm produces specialty produce for local chefs, and I am terrible at data. I just am the worst. So this was a real interest to me because I definitely have stuff I can learn.
Thanks, Trish. And happy to see you here. Chris,
Hello. My name's Chris Moore. I'm with Woody Rhino Farms in Humboldt County, California. I also have a small consulting firm working with watershed restoration grants and things of that nature, salmon habitat restoration, farm design, habitat enhancements. Data is something I work with for grant writing and farm, but I thought, it's always nice to see if there's other ideas and systems that can be put in place to better track what we're doing. We raise specialty crops, greens, salad, things mostly for restaurants and farmers market. And then I also work with the local farmers market association and food hub. So kind of a lot of different angles that this seems like it could be useful for.
perfect. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. All right. So that's useful. Get a better sense of everyone. And so let's just keep moving through this. So some of the things we're going to be going over and going through are how data connects to each part of effective small farm decision making. So we're going to go in that in a second. That is coming up. It's our cycle of sort of data-driven decision making. A little bit of definitions of key data concepts. We're not going to go too far into that because we want to make this as just straight up implementable as possible. So a little bit of that, data sources out there, best practices in data quality, collection, and management. Again, as customized and applicable to the small farmer as possible. And then, as Elizabeth mentioned, we're going to go into a little bit of an exercise on how to assess your own data strategy. And trust me, everyone here has some data strategy. That is a guarantee. So let's keep going. So the value of data in farming. So I wanted to just see, I wanted to do there's 3 polls in this. I think it's useful to just get a sense from people on this. If you could put down, actually 10 people, maybe we could just talk this actually through, because I think we can do it through talking. Does anyone have thoughts on sort of like what data means to them? Like if you had to have a definition for data, what would it mean to you?
It's gathering of results of any kind. There's obviously certain paths you can take with those results, but yeah.
Gathering results, yeah, okay. So data collection, yep.
numerical records of what you have done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that'll go into sort of like the quantitative data, which we'll get to, but absolutely. Yeah.
And that, just to piggyback on Trish, that could be numbers in terms of sales. It could be how many customers you have. It could be how much you owe. It could be how much you spend on inputs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that can sort of run the gamut. Anyone else?
I guess I would say, it's information that you like, categories of information that you can track through time that help, for me, inform decisions that I make in the future.
That's perfect. And I like the informing the decisions. That is a key there. So actually, I think we're gonna do it as a poll. So I'm just gonna keep going. Those are all great. And this is not a, fortunately, there's not some sort of like specific definition for data. It's really just digital information. And it's purposefully vague. So everything everyone said is data. There are different types of data. We're going to go into that in a second, just so people have a little bit of context on it. And it means different things to different people. Of course, we're going to be talking about it from the farmer's perspective here, but everyone uses data. So everything, realistically, everything everyone said is a type of data. I do like that point about informing decision making, though, because we're going to spend some time on that as well. So, for example, for context, different for everyone. For a farmer, and not even just a farmer, really, financial information for bookkeeping, records of crop production, product pricing, census tracking of small farms. So, I mean, it's not really there's no surprises here on that front. But the reason that data is already incredibly important, but is becoming more and more important, is just the fact that it is already a part of our daily lives, but it continues to just grow in that value. And it just continues to grow exponentially in terms of what is out there, to essentially support efficiencies on your farm and effectiveness of your farm. So I think that is key here. So I'm going to keep going. So this is kind of I would say one of if there's one thing I feel like to take away from this session, I actually think this is it. We're gonna come back to this a little bit later, but the data-driven decision-making cycle, it's something that we talk about all the time in Data Elevates. Really, I'm gonna walk through this a little bit here, but essentially, when we think of data, yes, it's digital information, but what do we really need data for? It's really for decision-making, either our own decision-making or someone else's decision-making. If it's just data that's just out there, it can be kind of useless, right? Unless it's actually being used. So how does it get used? So if we look at it from, I guess, start going clockwise through this thing, from demanding for information, if we start from there, the idea there is really, we should have questions we're trying to answer. For a farmer, of course, these are business types of questions or farm questions. So for example, what price should I charge for my cherry tomato or avocado or something product? That could be a question, right? So you have a specific question. Then you start thinking about the types of data sources that you might need to answer this type of a question, right? So this could be, let's say you're selling through farmers markets. This could be sort of just perusing different farmers markets and looking at the average price, the prices that people are selling their cherry tomatoes at, and sort of averaging that out. It could also be data that's already out there, publicly available data, which we can talk about as well. Data sources, data capturing is also around the collection side of it. Storing and managing data. This becomes more complicated with bigger organizations, but it is important also for small, like for farmers, small farmers, or any small business in general, just having data in one place. We'll talk about a little bit further, but having a place to consolidate that data. Access and permissions, that's a little bit more on security side. Analysis, though, is incredibly important, right? So that gets to, let's say you've gotten this sort of pricing data to try to help answer that question about what price should I charge for my cherry tomatoes, right? So doing some level of analysis, whether that be averaging it, whether that be, you know, I don't know, looking at patterns or trends, is important as well. And then interpretation and storytelling, that's just communication. That's often needed if there's more than one person, basically. If it's if you're, you know, maybe making a chart to show your insights or something like that, is not necessary, but it could be useful even for one person if it's easier to understand the insight you're trying to see. And then inevitably what you're trying to get to is this decision, which is that very top, right? The data-driven decision making. So you're trying to basically figure out, you have a question, you're trying to use information to then analyze it, to then make a decision. Because if you're not ending it up at making a decision, you're just collecting data. And that happens all the time. Not just, that's for any business, any person really, you know, collecting data. Because there's so much data out there, one of the challenges is that you can just collect data and not necessarily use it in a means that can actually lead to decisions. So I think that is key, like having a question and understanding when you're actually going to be using data to help answer that question or respond to it is critical. And it kind of informs the rest of the flow of this sort of diagram, or this cycle. Any questions on that really quick, or any thoughts there before we sort of continue? Okay, cool. And we're going to come back to this, but this is kind of like the focus here is on the decision making, basically. So, okay. So a little bit further on some of the nuances here. So when we talk about data, there's different types of data. There are, I think someone mentioned like numerical information, maybe financials, I forget exactly. That is quantitative data, and that is a type of data. So data that has essential data with numbers is quantitative data. Data that is, or information that is like descriptions. So I have here like product taste, product quality. Is it sweet? Is it sour? Savory? Whatever. Like that's all data too. It's just qualitative data. Categorical data is basically data placed in categories. And then there's different types of other types of data here. Discrete data is like number of products sold by market. It's basically information that can be discretely counted, essentially. So like a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, something like that. Continuous data is data that runs the gamut. Like a good example, I put average time to harvest. Another good example of it is like height. People don't go from like, you know, 5 foot 1 inch straight to 5 foot 2 inch. There's a gradual growth there, and that gradualness is the continuous side of is continuous data. So just so we know, have some context here. These are the 5. These are like 5 different commonly used types of data that are out there. And I want to just note that. Okay, so a few questions. So a question here. On your own farm, or I know at least you're starting up a farm, so on a farm that is forthcoming. Yeah, what types of decisions on your farm does data usually inform, and how? Like, where are you using data to inform your farm's decisions on your farm? Any thoughts, people?
I mean, you'd have to use like germination rates. You'd have to use like, then there's like weather type of data. So how many days of, I don't know, temperatures over a certain amount. It's probably pretty endless, but those are the first 2 that come to mind.
I can think of like a ton of just instances. For instance, you know, something that I collect every day. We do pastured poultry, eggs and meat, turkeys and seasonal veggies. So, I mean, I'm collecting eggs every day. I want to know what my production rate for my different ages of birds are. I track weights on my broilers to see if they are progressing the way they're supposed to. So I know if my processing date is going to be, if I'm going to hit it. I look at my yields per bed when I'm looking at my different veggies and how successful they are or how not successful they are. We track costs, we track sales at the markets that are different venues. We have to input all that information into QuickBooks. It's like there's like so much data that we track. And
That's
it
great.
just spans the gamut.
That sounds great. Others?
I'm not that good at tracking, but I do something that's been particularly important to us this year is year-over-year harvest tracking, yield tracking, because it's what made us make the decision this year to fallow a lot of the beds and put a lot of them in cover crops, because I've been watching our year-over-year yields decline for the last 2 or 3 years.
That's just a great example of sort of using that data directly to make that decision. It's a key decision you made, and just the power of sort of like that, not only tracking it right now, but also the value of tracking it over time, right? You sort of have to I think people oftentimes, and I understand this particularly with farmers, because there's just so many other things that are going on that you kind of want to just like have data and then just make a decision, right? Like if you're going to be doing something, you almost want to have an effect of that right away. But the fact that you're tracking it over time, and maybe didn't see the value of it initially, but and eventually it led to a big decision you just made, is a good example of just like the overall value to sustainability and growth of a farm. Cool. Yeah, that sounds great.
Just to note, Prem, in the chat, Dominica also put some thoughts on CSAs, including costs for crops to choose what's in and out, survey data for customer preferences, as well as sales data, accounting, and irrigation. So I just wanted to highlight that for those people who are, because I know you can't necessarily see the chat because you're also presenting. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, perfect. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Okay, great. And it also just like highlights the fact that there is so much data out there to be collecting and hopefully all being used, that we have to be almost, as small farmers, and understanding just like how limited our resources are, our own time is, frankly. There's only certain amounts of it we can actually use, so we have to be almost selective on frankly on the data we're collecting to then inform decisions. Yeah, so we've gone over most of these, and I think through the chat as well, but examples, there's millions of examples: market channel decisions, varieties, seeding, irrigation, effectiveness of pricing. I mean, this list could go on forever, but those are just some, but great examples, everyone. And then another question I had, and we don't need to make this a poll, I think we can just talk this through like we've been doing, yeah, what types of sources of data are you using for your farm operation? So this could be both private data, like obvious ones are sort of like pricing information, finances, but like or financial information. It could be private information like that, or it could be publicly available information. But I'm just curious what types of information or data sources people are using in their farm operations. Like where are we essentially getting our information to inform these decisions?
I think the thing that comes to mind for my farm currently is looking at like crop planning for 2023. And we've been going back through and looking at our yield per square foot on our beds for salad crops and other items that we sell to our restaurants versus some of the more specialty crops and market-driven crops, like for farmers market, like tomatoes, and looking at what that dollar per square foot yield is, and then making that determination for next year's planting, whether or not certain beds are going to go into bok choy or if they're going to go into cherry tomatoes.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. And and frankly, through different training programs that I've held, that's the kind of thing that I've been trying to push as well. I know it's a challenge, but it's so valuable to be tracking it, that type of information for making decisions going forward. So that's a great example. Other data sources, again, both public and private. Yeah, go.
Yeah, it's hard to track all the time. I think what I notice is when I'm running the farm. So I try to look at it as a once a month, we'll collect that data and we write it down. Ideally, it would be more frequent, but if we can have it throughout the course of the whole year, then we have an average.
Yeah,
because I get overwhelmed by too much data. I think that your comment about that, it's easy to have a mountain of it that just sits there and we don't do anything with it.
Yeah, and not to go too far on this, but just to add to that, I feel like, yeah, you're tracking it once a month. And you're saying that, you know, it'd be great to track it more, but really, if it's helping you make the decisions that you want to make, like it's informing the decisions how you want them to inform it, then you might be tracking it to the extent that makes the most sense given your operations. So that's great. Any others? Again, both public or private data sources that are out there that people are using or collecting, I guess.
Well, I also work for one of the local farmers markets. And so that's been a really good source of data for me in terms of being able to see what people are selling their produce for. And obviously farmers market retail versus restaurant wholesale are not the same, although most chefs will pay those prices for high quality produce, but that's been a really good source of data for me.
That's great. Yeah, that makes sense.
And convenient because I'm already there.
I was gonna say, that creates efficiency right there. Any others, Michelle or others out there?
I'm gonna jump in. Oh, sorry.
Okay, go.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of have categories of data where it's like you've got membership data. It might be like, you know, contact information or geographical location for logistics. And then you've got your sales data for money. And then there's also the farm operations data streams. So it kind of depends on like what bucket of data is it. And then, yeah, it's a lot of database and platform jumping. The sales data might be spread across the website platform and QuickBooks, and also some direct point of sale accounts, et cetera, and everything kind of gets aggregated somewhere, whether it's in the profit and loss statements or on some log somewhere. But you know, woe be the person who doesn't have the breadcrumbs to all of the databases and platforms, right? Because there's just a lot of switching and jumping and kind of cramming information and data validation into places where it sometimes didn't naturally want to go.
That's a great point. Yeah. And that kind of gets to a little bit of the managing data. We're unfortunately not going to, we could put like sessions into managing data. We don't really have the time for that, but that kind of gets to that point as well, like having data in just all these different places and having to deal and having to sort of use all of them to make decisions. You said membership data. Are you running a CSA or?
Yeah, we have a CSA as well as wholesale tracking. I'd say would be the two, you know, biggest kind of sales accounts that we have. Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, yeah, that sounds great. So I just want to keep going. Again, there's so many different data sources out there, but this is obviously nowhere. This is not even a 0.001% of these data sources out there. But yeah, private data, of course, revenues, expenses, as Chris has mentioned, crop production tracking, time to harvest, things of that nature as well. There's tons of information on that front. And then there's also just a lot of publicly available data. Trish mentioned the farmers market data. That was a really good one. We had commodity prices, the ag census, weather data can be useful for farmers, and that can be publicly available as well, and as well as like GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems mapping data. I believe there is just to plug it, I guess there's a good CAF session on this on GIS mapping as well that is useful for farmers. Can mention later, but yeah, so they're just a lot of different data sources out there, and I think it's important to highlight just the fact that there's both. We've talked a lot about I mean, Trish talked about publicly available data in terms of the farmers markets, but there's a lot of publicly available data out there that can be useful. But again, it kind of just depends on the types of questions you're trying to answer, because you can be overwhelmed with what's out there and publicly available, just openly available. Cool. Any questions so far? If not, we're going to go into sort of best practices in using data. But yeah, any questions so far on anything? Okay, let me just see if there's. Yep. Okay. Cool. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on best practices in using data. So, a question for you all. So what is good data? And what I mean by good data is just like, what do you find makes data useful? So when you see some type of data out there, yeah, what makes it useful for you to make your decisions? Is there are there characteristics of that data? Give you a second to sort of think that through.
I would say for me, one of the things is having complete data, with not with, little bits and pieces missing. And the other thing is consistency. If I'm trying to track something over time, if I have holes, the trends don't mean as much. So those are two, I think, big pieces for me: complete and consistent.
That's perfect. Others? Those are great. Yeah. Any others?
I'd say portability and compatibility. So like one example being like trying to get data out of, say, a form or some non-CSV kind of format, and then trying to get it into a database, or pulling some information off a price sheet off somebody's PDF or something, and kind of an incompatible. That's the less good data. So when it's good, it's like, yes, data that I can drop and copy paste, and or do in batches, right? That's always really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, nailing it. These are all things we have. Anything else anyone wanted to add before I keep going?
I'll add one thing, and that is I need to understand how good that data is in my particular situation, and kind of what the plus or minus accuracy going forward is going to be. So I can use the data, but I need to understand, is it going to give me good results going forward? If I'm using it for I'm thinking of data for planning. But the same would be true of data for, analyzing things that happened in the past. How good is the data in terms of plus or minus and its applicability to my particular situation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I'm just going to actually move on because I feel like this is to what we have here, because I think these are all literally noted out here. So you guys did an amazing job. So the breadth of information. So understanding what that data actually is, like the descriptions, the counts of that type of data. If it's like pricing information, understanding the product that is connected to, understanding where we're getting that information, all of the sourcing of that information, all of that kind of things around it. I think to Josh's point, I believe both the timeliness and that it meets our needs. So this goes back to the idea of the cycle that I was showing before, the data-driven decision-making cycle, and that demand for information, right? So if we have a question, how well does this data actually help answer or respond to that question, right? So like, how applicable actually is it to what we're looking to do with the data? So that's more of a personal front or a business front, but I think that is what makes it good to you as a business owner, a small farmer, or personally. And then the timeliness of the information, right? If we stick with just the pricing example, or it could be anything, but with the pricing example, having farmers market information for, say, the last 5 weeks, it could be super useful for someone who is trying to determine the price of how much they should sell their avocados at the farmer's market or something. But having it 10 years ago, probably less useful. So just like just how recent, how connected is it to the decision you're trying to make? And then the last two things here, the last two bullets, I believe people already noted. So information that's usable, minimizing incomplete data, and it's got to be inputted correctly. So either by yourself or in the data that you've sort of like culled from other areas, it needs to be provided correctly. So these are, yeah, so great. I think everyone sort of hit the mark there. So it doesn't meet this criteria when it's unusable. It's incomplete. It's hard to analyze because partially because there isn't to that first bullet in the last slide, like there's just not enough information around it to really understand the data. And I forgot who mentioned this, but someone mentioned this is perfect. The idea that it's incompatible with other data sets or other applications. Someone mentioned that, which is great because that's right here too. So that's exactly on that front. And then just noting, to me personally, you know, one of the challenges when you see data that is incomplete or inconsistent or has any of these issues with it is that you just don't want to use it. Why do you want to use it? Because it's not really trustworthy. Like you can't make this. It's hard to have confidence in decisions you're making if you don't have a complete set of data that you're trying to use to make those decisions, or it's not timely, right? Yeah, so I just have a little, I like this Dilbert comic right there. But are you sure the data you gave me is correct? I've been giving you incorrect data for years. This is the first time you asked what I said. The data is totally accurate. Yeah, so I think that's kind of that example there. And just to solidify it, some of these are pretty obvious, but so this is obviously bad data. Like what parts of this can people just name out, like areas that are bad about this data, I guess, based off what we just mentioned.
Got some data gaps.
Yep, that one's very clear.
There's also no units with the quantity sold.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yep. So the information around it, breadth of information. Yep.
Right. We don't know if that's 9 tomatoes or 9 pounds or 9 crates.
Yep. Exactly.
Somehow this 99,000 doesn't seem like it might be accurate either.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. I didn't note that and make it very clear. But yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Well, we also don't know where the data come from, who collected the data. Did everybody get a consistent set of questions?
Yeah. Anything else?
Well, there's obvious inconsistent notation on the dragon fruit. So it would be better if it were consistent.
Exactly. Yes, that goes to like the data validation. I think someone had mentioned this actually earlier on, but that was, yeah, that's a good one. That's kind of what I was trying to get at there. So tomatoes, and like dragon fruits, those are small things, but when you're looking at, say, I mean, this is a small table, but if you were looking at a giant table, and you wanted to just look at dragon fruit information, you would totally lose dragon fruits potentially. Same goes with tomatoes, things like that. So having like when you can, like having a consistency to that is like, that's that idea of, someone mentioned data validation, that's connected to that piece. But you can sort of sort and filter much easier if you're sort of consistent with your terminology. Yeah.
And accuracy, like La Mesa is spelled wrong. So again, if you're trying to aggregate that data just for La Mesa, you're going to miss this one altogether.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So those are kind of like some of the main things there. These might seem like small things, but yeah, this all leads to just having less and less confidence in your data. And the idea behind this is really data quality. Like we want to have quality data when you're using it. This is more important, of course, I imagine, when we're collecting our own data, but any data that you're using should have some level of completeness and quality to it. So thanks for that. That's great. Cool. All right. So yeah, so a few quick notes on, again, not going to go super far into managing data because a lot of this gets a lot more complicated when you're talking about like bigger organizations and things like that. But it does connect to everyone here. So when we talk about data management, first of all, I'm going to go to that last point actually first. Everyone has some system for managing data. Everyone has some data somewhere. And as long as you have something, you have some system for it, whether it be a good system or a bad system. That is a different point here, right? But everyone is managing data somehow. So what are some just super general best practices in regards to managing data, right? So one thing is it's useful to store it all in one place. I think someone mentioned this before. It's absolutely useful to store it all in one place, right? And the world honestly is becoming more and more cloud-based, like Google Drive, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, Dropbox, like all these different types of things are cloud. The reason it's useful to potentially store on the cloud, not necessary, but can be useful, is for several different reasons. One is that, say you had it on your laptop, and just like on your laptop, and it broke, you lost, like you might not be able to get that information back, right? There's a level of protection on that front if you're storing the cloud, and it's just more accessible. And there's a myriad of other reasons, but those are like key points there: the accessibility and some level of security, and the fact that like it's not physically based like on your computer, so it can be found in other areas in case something happens. Are useful points for storing in the cloud if you so choose to do so. And again, things like Google Drive are, I believe, for your purpose, it'd just be free. So recording data digitally at the start, I know this can be challenging very oftentimes for farmers, because out in the field, out in farmers markets, out in different places, storing to different types of data. If you're collecting that data, just as a best practice, it is useful to just record it initially, just record it straight off digitally. And the reason for that is just from our own experiences. I guess from our own experiences, if someone's recording it on pen and paper, and even if there's good intentions to then move it over to digital, so many, like 9 times out of 10, it just doesn't happen, because just like we all know, everyone sort of, particularly small farmers, just resource strapped, right? There's just not that much time to just continue to just do it, and you're doing it twice, right? You're recording it to pen and paper, then you're doing it digital. If there's a way to just beat out the middleman essentially there and go straight to digital, that's best. Just best practice here, using some type of security. Again, almost all of these, not all, almost all of them really, I believe, have some of the cloud-based providers, Google Drive, etc. They all have some level of password. It's just an important thing to have some level of security on your data. And then finally, having a file structure to easily locate different data sources. So making sure that you're using some structure to like where you're putting stuff, right? Even if it's in one place, it could be a challenge to find certain types of information if you don't know like what you're calling it. One of the values I will say, again, not to harp on it, but like one of the values on some of these cloud providers is that, like, if you, for example, go to Google Drive, there's already like inbuilt search engine kinds of things there, so it's super like, even if you don't remember certain words in your file name, if you type parts of it, it'll pop up. So there's a value to that as well. Like it's incredibly accessible from that perspective. It just makes it easy. But yeah, if there's some sort of file structure, how you're naming things basically, that can be very useful, particularly when you're thinking about collecting data over time. You could just lose stuff, and then you lose the point of having that information. So these are sort of like hopefully relatively simple stuff that everyone can kind of implement to some extent. And I think they're just incredibly, they can be very valuable. Any questions on data management or anything I mentioned before?
I wanted to push back just a little bit on that second point of recording data digitally at the start for the small farm, and particularly for the very small farm.
Yeah.
Where I think that in many cases it's unrealistic, and I think that your point is good, that it's less likely to get entered in many cases. But I think that it's unlikely to get entered at all if that is the hurdle that people have to get over. And there are a couple of advantages to entering using, we use pencil and paper because pencil still works when it's wet. But we have a particular, it's built into the system when it's going to get transferred from paper to digital. And not all of the data that on our particular scale, not all the data is useful transferred. A lot of it is more useful just kept in that paper form. And in a good filing structure, it's just as easy for us to go and look it up, if not easier, in the future and refer back to the paper than it is to transfer it over to digital and put it into a digital form.
Oh yeah, okay. So did you say you have a system for when you actually transfer over, when you do transfer things over to digital?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's just saying this is the time, we have a time set aside where like that's the time where it gets transferred over. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I totally, sorry, go ahead.
I would echo that. I have tried doing the digital thing, or and when you're out in the field, it's really hard. What do you have? You have a phone, right? That's pretty much what you would use to track, and it's really hard to see the screen out there. You have to set thing. I mean, I use paper. I'll use a little notebook and make notes, and then when I'm doing things like grinding feed and I'm keeping track of stuff, I mean, it's dusty, it's dirty. It's like, I have forms that I built that I fill out and I bring them in, and they'll go into a box, an inbox, and I'll just input them when I can. But yeah, it'd be great to do everything just once, but it's just not super realistic.
Yeah, no, I think I was mentioning like this is the best, this would be a good practice, but I totally understand this can be a challenge for particularly a small farmer. So I 100% get that. I think that idea that Josh is mentioning, at least in terms of like having some process at least down for like when you're transferring that information over, I think at least having like that sounds like that sounds great, because I think the challenge is if you're planning on using that information in some level of analysis with other information, or doing quicker analysis. Oftentimes, obviously, you could do that through a computer. If you don't transfer that information over, you've sort of lost it in terms of the insights you can create from it, right? So totally understand what you're saying there. But I think, yeah, having some level of even like a process for getting it there, like Josh was mentioning, I think that would be great, just so information is not lost, I guess. Information that you would like to use on the computer or so is not lost. Is useful. But yeah, I get the point in terms of it's challenging.
One more idea. If you do find that paper and pencil is the best, but you do actually want to transfer that, and maybe you're not great about transferring, or you don't have a time to transfer it, or maybe you have a lot of back data that you want transferred, sometimes it's useful, something like Upwork. I don't know if you guys have ever used Upwork. It's like kind of like a TaskRabbit. You can pay people to do simple jobs online. And there are lots and lots of people who for like $20 an hour will do data entry and just do it. So you might be able to find someone who can just do that, sit down and do this for you. And you pay them $100 and they can go through and spend hours just doing it for you. So just like, there are also resources online if people are looking for ways to kind of maybe turn their old paper records into electronic records, or you would have to work with them and give them like the spreadsheet or whatever. But just another thought. If you were looking at ways to do that.
Cool, thanks, Ed. Yeah. So definitely understand. the points there. Makes a
And
lot of
Kareem,
sense.
just noting the 2 notes in the chat, if you saw those
Oh.
about the paper logs being kept simple. And then Trish was sharing that she's terrible at transferring that information and is very undisciplined about it. So just wanted to make those, I think these are all great comments too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for noting that. So in terms of Trisha's point about transferring the information. So on the one hand, of course, this is the value in just seeing if you have a tablet out there or something, if there's a way to do it digitally at the start. But on the other hand, understanding that might be impractical for different situations, as noted. Totally understand that.
If I may, I want to jump, it's Dominic, I want to jump in and say we've kind of approached this in 2 ways on our farm, which is to start, we've introduced more QR codes so that we can hybridize the non-digital and digital. That's been helpful. And they're not that hard to figure out, et cetera. There's various types. Those have been helpful for us to kind of bridge that gap. The other thing is to make sure that all of our paper logs are essentially as automatable as possible. So there's the least thinking, the least words, and the most just tick marks or 1s and 0s or numbers, things that are easy to transcribe, easy to see at a glance, easy to tabulate before they've been transferred, just to reduce odd data from getting in the mix, even on the paper forms. And that way your paper forms are going to match your databases better. That will make that transfer easier. And like any trick or tip you can give yourself to make it easier is whatever gets the data in is better than not. So yeah, we don't see anything as cheating when it comes to that. Anything that gets the data in the door is good. And then getting the best data, from there is like the next goal. But I hope that helps because yeah, there's definitely some bridges there for the non-digital to digital.
No, that's a great point. That's a great points, actually. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think just piggybacking off of that in relation to Tricia's comment, I think the main thing here, as sort of Josh mentioned initially, but I think people are sort of noting their own ways of going about this, is that just having some level of a process or like a time when you're transferring information over is valuable. If you are presuming, of course, you're recording it in paper, having some process for doing that, because I think the challenge is if not, there's a pretty high likelihood you might not actually transfer it over, in which case it could be lost in. It could be information that you're not creating the insights you want to create from. So I'm going to keep going, but just so person on time here. But those are great comments and great points there. So in terms of data analysis, analyzing data, again, just some of the fundamentals here. Kind of going back to what we were saying before doing any sort of data analysis, it's important, again, harping on that sort of the data-driven decision-making cycle. It is important first and foremost to know what question you're answering. Like what is the business or farm question that you want to have answered? Like, why are you collecting data? Why are you doing this analysis? If you haven't started out from that point, doing analysis itself just for analysis reasons, which I think happens all the time. I've certainly been prey to that sort of situation, can just be a rabbit hole of like inefficiency, basically. So understanding, are you looking to evaluate market channels? Are you looking to optimize your price? Are you looking to determine what products you should be selling or what quantities? Understanding what that question first is incredibly important. And that will drive the sort of data that you're sourcing, that will then drive the types of analysis that you were looking at, and there's different places you can do analysis. I think for most cases that particularly that we would see with small farms, this is not like a giant IT companies here or anything like that. This you'd be focusing on really Excel, Google Sheets types of products or applications, which Google Sheets is free, right? So there's certainly applications for using that. And then there are ways to see insights itself through simple charts, bar charts, etc. Not necessary, particularly if it's just one person who's sort of doing all of this, but can be useful. But the key point here again is that know your question first before doing any analysis, or you might just be stuck in sort of this analysis paralysis situation. That can happen. Yeah, I think that's like the sort of the key points on that front. Any questions or thoughts on this before we sort of move on? Because I'm going to go, because after this, we're just going to go into kind of a, pretty soon we're going to sort of go into an activity on the farm, like in your farm's data strategy. Okay, cool. All right, let me just see, there's a chat in here. Oh, okay. All right, so farm data strategy. Okay, so this is a poll. We don't need it to be a poll. We can sort of just talk this thing through. So what types of questions about your farm do you want data to help answer? So like, and I think you could probably focus on questions you have that you're not yet satisfied with how you're getting the response on, or getting a solution for. It's not a poll here, so I just want to talk through particularly the key ones we're thinking about here. Like what questions that you would like to use data to inform an answer for on your farm. Any thoughts? Obviously no wrong answers here.
The one that I'm consistently looking at and don't have a good way to evaluate is the cost of labor, the amount of labor, or the cost of labor, more or less the same thing, required to produce certain crops. So yield is important, and someone mentioned like identifying the yield from their crops to determine what they're going to grow next season. But for me, it's also important to know like how much does it cost me to grow that in time, and obviously water is one of them. Fundamentally, water is not a huge variable. They're all about similar at similar seasons. Not everything, but most. But labor is a particular issue.
That's great, thanks. Well, not great because that's a John, but that's a good one. Others? Maybe like one or two others.
I'll chime in and just say most of the data that I'm using is for but what was just mentioned. So figuring out cost of production and planning future crops. So things like crop yield, but also planning labor, which means, you know, having some labor numbers and those kinds of things.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So similar lines, but yeah, it makes sense. It's a key one. Anyone else?
I would say cost of production for vegetable crops. Animals are a little bit easier because they're more constrained, but there's so much to go into the veggies. And another one that comes along with that are those variations according to season. And that's something I think that I always struggle with.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
Can you say a little bit more about that? I'm unclear about what you mean about variations. I mean, I know things vary according to season, but variations of the cost.
Yeah, I mean, so let me see. So you know, different crops do better at different times of the year. Productivity is up. You know, your winter crops at certain times, but then you're also competing with sunlight. So your DTMs are different. You know, DTMs are measured during the optimal part of the year, but that's not what you get early in the season. And, you know, down here in San Diego, we start production very early in the season. It's warm enough, the soil's warm enough, but we don't get a lot of daylight. And so some crops do better and some crops do really terribly at that time of the year. So, and so a full bed of one type of crop early in the season is very different than what you get later in the season.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that and clarifying it. So these are great questions. So what I want to get to here, and Elizabeth, I think minus us, there's 8. I think it still might be good to see if we can do like, I think you're there, Elizabeth, somewhere. I can't see your picture, but if we can do say 2 groups of 3 and a group of just like 2 people. I think it might be good to still have it that way. But so for this next step, this is the sort of an activity you want to do here. Just very quickly, we want to do a little bit of sort of this activity around looking at your farm's data strategy. So I want you all to sort of think, piggybacking on the last slide there, really, on like the key questions about your farm you want help data answer, which means it is not yet answering to your satisfaction. I want you to think about those questions. We're going to put you into small like breakout rooms. And what we'd like you to be able to do is just talk amongst yourselves in terms of both the questions. Some of you've already raised them. It's totally fine, of course, if they're the same questions that people are having. But what we want to do is you to look at sort of like the different parts of this data-driven decision-making cycle, right? And see where there are strengths, but when there also might be sort of areas that we can improve on, or gaps, right? Like maybe we're not sourcing, or we're not collecting the right information. Maybe it's like in different places. Maybe we're not storing it correctly. Like, how can we use data better to inform these decisions in relation to a specific, like an actual question that you have about your farm? With the overall goal of like, the overall goal here is to create a more efficient process for using data in your decision making. So practically, yeah, focus on the questions that you have, and then what we're going to do is spend roughly 10 minutes. We only have 20 minutes left in the session, so definitely no more than 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, basically talking in your sort of mini groups here about where you fit in within this, and what the gaps might be in regards to answering those questions. And then we're going to have maybe like 3 to 5 minutes of just a quick share out after that. Does that make sense? All right, let me see. There's some comments here. Okay.
Yeah, so the rooms are set up so I can open them and then we'll close them out. Everyone will get the notice in about 9 minutes for 1 minute closing. Does that make sense? Or that's what you want to do, yeah?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Let's
Awesome.
do that. Yeah.
All right, so I think you'll see an invitation to join a room. Sorry, let me do the time on here. All right. And we're opening it up.
So I'm just going to join a room as well. For now, just move back and forth. So let me, oh, there we go. All All right, let me share this one more time here. Hope I'm sharing the right screen there. So we don't have a ton of time because I guess 10 minutes left in this session. So maybe like just one or two people. Any share out we can have from like a group or two about in terms of like, you know, the question that the question they might have that that data could inform, but maybe is not satisfactorily doing so. And if there's any sort of gaps you're seeing in sort of like your own system in regards to that.
So did Dominica drop off? I think she did. She had to drop off, but I wanted to kind of mention briefly, I think we actually got to it, but just at the very end. So Dominica was also talking about this question of labor, but she has a system, there's a system in place to actually capture the hours that workers spend in the field. And they've been doing it for a few years, but they haven't actually, the gap has actually been not in the data capture, but in the analysis and identifying ways to put that to use to answer the question. And so they mentioned that the key kind of the missing piece is having examples of formulas that they could use to actually turn that into kind of a useful productivity calculation that they can apply for their HR planning in future. So they might be back, but I thought that was kind of interesting because the problem wasn't on the data capture side, it was actually more on the analysis side and the usage side. So I just thought get the ball rolling with that one.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Zan. It's great. Maybe another group or two. Anyone? Without calling on people here.
Well, there was only 3 groups, so technically
Yeah.
each group maybe needs to go. So I know
Yeah.
who the groups are if I need to call out anyone.
So do I. Sure, I'll just throw out a name here. Chris, sorry. I'll call on you for a second here. You seem like a nice guy. So do you, from your group, doesn't even need to be you, but like any sort of, yeah, same question. Any gaps? What's the question? Is there any gaps in terms of the data strategy you're using?
I think it's kind of the common theme. It's the data's collected, but how do you get it from either a paper format or disperse systems into one system so you can do streamline analysis. We had paper data collection, and we have, like, for me, I have a mix of paper and then probably 3 to 4 platforms that software programs that have data, and it's getting it all there. We definitely looking at the idea of using someone like hired through Upwork or something like that to take all that paper data makes a lot of sense. That was a really good idea. I've used Upwork for other projects, but not for the farm. So it's funny to like hear that and not have really put the two together. I'll hire people through Upwork for consulting work that I do, but not for my farm.
So that's great. Well, not great, but yeah, that sounds. but that's a great example.
Yeah.
That's great.
So Chris, he summed it up really well.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, that's appreciate that. And that seems to be certainly a challenge, I feel like, through farms, probably small farms across the nation, really, in terms of like transitioning stuff from when particularly applicable, transitioning stuff from information from paper to digital. So appreciate that. I would love to just ask every group here, but I know that we have 5 more minutes here, so I feel like we probably need to move. We probably just need to good to continue on here. But thank you again. Hopefully everyone, at least we're able to brainstorm. I think that the goal of this, on a side note, was not just to share out. It would be like, if there's a value, the specific value I want people to take away from this session really is in thinking about data within this cycle, like thinking about data in terms of the question you're trying to answer, the point where you answer that question and sort of the process in it. And because everything will fit within some part of this process. And so I think thinking strategically like that is sort of the overall goal of this session. So hopefully that's at least an emphasized point there. So I'm just going to keep going here. We have just a few more minutes. So yeah, a few of the things we learned. So talked about data strategy a bunch. We talked about the data-driven decision-making cycle, and again, focusing on the questions you have, and really making those questions drive the data you're collecting. The emphasis you're putting on having that information in the medium you want it. Obviously we're focusing on digital, but understand some of the challenges and caveats and things of that nature on that front. The importance of data quality. That's particularly important when, of course, we're collecting data, just making sure that it's complete, timely, and accurate. And the key point there is, again, we want everyone to have confidence in the data they're using. There's no confidence in the data that you're using, or less confidence. It's just inherently less likely that you're actually going to use it for anything. So that piece of it. And then, yeah, key aspects of data management and analysis. On the data management side, keeping things in one place is the ideal scenario in almost every front. And then also, keeping things in one place, and then also having an organization, like a file structure. However it is, wherever it is, having some level of a structure so you can at least readily access your information is important. And then key take one of that one, more intentional, effective your data strategy, the better for your business. That's just the thing. Everyone has a data strategy because everyone goes through that cycle one way or another, whether you like it or not. And so that's but intentionally thinking about it in that way, I think is going to be valuable. So just to wrap up, we have about 2 more minutes here, but any questions you might have for us? And again, this is the first of, there's going to be 2 more sessions after this coming up. I believe they're each about 2 weeks apart. But any questions, any burning questions anyone has? There's like 8 chat comments here, but I think Zan must be handling this. Any other questions on this, on the cycle, on data quality, data management? Okay.
There was a question that I think can be moved to maybe the next workshop on survey, like what annual survey information farmers markets are collecting and if that gets shared, which kind of falls in line with our next session, which is on market channel evaluation and some of that. But maybe we can just put a ping in that.
Okay.
I made a note of it. It was in the chat earlier during.
Okay, great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Sadly, I missed the start of this. So is the recording, maybe you said, but is the recording going to be available?
Yes, great. Thank you. So we will be posting the recording fairly soon on both CAF's YouTube channel and the registration pages, so everyone can access it if they missed any parts of it, or if you want to encourage other folks to join too and get caught up, that will be available. Thanks for that question.
Great question. Yeah, just to recap, CAF Small Farm Tech Hub provides free technical assistance to farmers in California. So just to recap from the beginning of the session, that CAF is here to support small farmers. And then the next session, so hopefully everyone enjoyed it, got at least 1 or 2 things out of this session. Like if you can get 1 or 2 things out of any session, it's probably useful itself. But there are 2 more sessions to come up, and they're both on market channel evaluation, but just different fronts of it. There is the next session will be particularly on like scenario planning, utilizing data for scenario planning. And then the one after that is sort of on the overall process, or there's different ways to go about it, but an approach to market channel evaluation, sort of like an experimental design kind of approach to it. So we'll go into those, obviously those points, but yeah, they're both on market channel evaluation. And as you can see, they're both about 2 weeks apart, November 30th and December 14th. So happy to see you all there, and happy to invite others as well. But thanks again for everything. Thanks for the insightful questions and everything else, and sticking with it. And I hope to see you guys soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Prem. And if I could just make one note for our attendees, we did create this webinar based on needs from farmers who shared they weren't sure if they should approach a market channel, if they should sell online, they weren't sure how to go about that decision. So if you have other thoughts on this, if you want to see data get used for other areas like with labor formulas, like was just mentioned, like please let us know in the feedback, because we'll be happy to try to construct those for you in the future. It's just noting that. So thank you, everyone.
All right, bye.
Thank you, Brian. Bye.